Right after the sermon, an altar call was made. The pastor said, for those that want to be saved, come down. Listen, don't worry about who's around. This is between you, your soul, and God. Yeah, that's right, God. See, that's him. That feeling you keep feeling that's been piercing your heart. And as they stood, some other folks stood too. But now, there must have been an altar call in the back because that's where those other folks headed to. And it must have been held in the hallways of the foyer. And there must have been ministers back there waiting for them for prayer. And there must have been a pool in the back with water inside. And it must have been there for those other folks who wanted to be saved and baptized. It must have been. Had to be. Because see, when the altar call was made, those other folks headed down that way during the altar call. Just as soon as it was announced. As if on cue did these other folks stand and proceed to leave out. Proceed to walk out. As if dismissal was announced, did these folks then gather their things to go, just as they had done so many times before during the altar call. As people were calling on God's name in search for help from all their hurt and pain. These other folks, in the midst of all this, thought it simply best to leave. Perfect timing. Let's ease out while they're crying during the altar call. Soon as the pastor opened up the doors to the church, these other folks stood up first to leave. Sometimes before then, like when the people would start clapping. Yeah, see, because of them, this meant services came to an end. It was all irrelevant after that. Attention now turned to being the first one out the seat, first down the aisle, first to the back, first out the door. Because that's what the altar call stood for to these other folks. It was simply an early start to be the first ones to depart. It had no relevance to them. To them, it was an insignificant event, which meant their presence to be present there was just irrelevant, which meant that since it made no sense to sit in an insignificant event of no relevance, meant they could leave. When those with troubles dared to believe, they walked out, disregarding the importance of what the altar call stood for, what the altar call was about, took no thought as to what it must feel like to those other folks who cried in need of help and searched for a glimpse of hope. No, it didn't bother them at all to leave. It didn't matter that folks cried and that some of those folks sat by their sides with tears in their eyes, crying, dying inside. No, they would just tap them on the shoulder and say, excuse me, I'm trying to get by. I'm trying to leave. Quickly leave. Vacate. Exit. All before, look, I got to beat these other folks out the door. I've got no time to take the amount of time it's going to take to wait for these folks to have a breakthrough. I can't wait. That takes too long, too. Why, that's an extra 10 or 15 minutes more I can't sit for. I only came to hear the pastor preach. Then I'm gone. That extra 10, 15 minutes can be spent getting home. I only came to hear the unadulterated word of God being preached. And after that, yeah, I got a schedule to keep. So these other folks would leave. In no particular order at all, just during the altar call would they do this. Grab their things, their belongings, and quickly head toward the back where the exits were at. See, it was routine for them to do this. Habit, I suppose. See, to those other folks, the altar call wasn't a part of the service at all. It was merely a gesture from the pastor for those wanting prayer to come up there, to be out the way of those folks that didn't want to stay. And I often wondered about those other folks who sat there in their chairs and cried, if they would look up and see these other folks walk by. I often wondered about those who stood there desiring prayer, if they would look up and see folks walk out as if they didn't care. And I wondered if it bothered them the way that it bothered me to see them all leave in their time of need so quickly. I wondered if it bothered them or hurt them at all. I wondered if it caused them to pause. Man, I hope not. I hope that they wouldn't stop and come down. And I hope they didn't concern themselves for those other folks who, for whatever reason, couldn't stick around. But you know what? God bless them. Let them go. Let them leave. Because if God has you in a place in your heart where you dare to believe that he's there, then rise up from your chair, tears and all, and make your way down to the altar call. And if you're scared, I'll walk with you. Now, as far as those other folks' reasons for leaving, I don't know. Whatever their reasons that they simply had to go are their reasons. As for me, I'm staying. And I'm believing God with you. Believing God for your breakthrough.